Alright guys, I'm going to get started. So my name is Mrs. Alexander. I am an art teacher here at Raku High School. I've been teaching here for about 11 years. I am still chasing my dream, so it doesn't really matter how long it takes you to get there. It's really all about the journey, and that's something that we've really been talking about a lot here at SRI that I've been noticing. We all have this end goal in mind, but there's so many pathways to get there, and you learn so many different things along the way. So when I was in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Absolutely no clue. When I was in 9th grade, I took an ag class with Steve Miller, and he was fantastic, and I absolutely loved the class, and I loved science, and I thought for sure I was going to do something in science. And then because of our classes at Weiser, we were kind of limited in the path that you took, and I really loved art as well. And so I had to make a decision, and I was 14 years old? So I decided I wanted to try art. So I started taking art courses, and that limited my abilities to take science classes. But I really loved the arts, and I was okay with that. And then I graduated high school, and I had to go to college because that's what you did. And so I had friends that went to Bloomsburg University, and they said, hey, just come to Bloomsburg. So I said, okay, not having a clue as to what I wanted to do. So I went to Bloomsburg, and I had my first year, I took a sculpture class, which was kind of cool. I didn't love sculpture, but it was art, and so I really enjoyed the creativity part of that. I really loved my professor. We really connected. We had a great relationship. And then my freshman year ended, and it was time to schedule my classes for my sophomore year, and I couldn't get into any other art courses except for sculpture 2. So I was like, well, I'm going to do it because I still really like art. I don't know what I want to do in life yet, even though it's my second year of college. So I took that art course, and I hated it. I absolutely hated sculpture. I decided I didn't want to do that, and I actually ended up dropping the course because I was just really unhappy with what I was doing. I didn't like the materials that we were working with. I was just not finding my groove. But in that course, we did create one work out of clay, and it really spoke to me. Something about manipulating that raw material that came right from the earth. I really, really liked it, and I was kind of good at it too. So my professor really kind of pushed me to take ceramics courses, and he didn't really give me a choice. He said, you're taking ceramics 1 next semester. I said, okay. So he called the department, talked to the secretary, and popped me in his course for the next semester, and so I took a ceramics 1 course, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. I was going to graduate college with my degree in art, with a focus in ceramics, and I was going to have my own ceramic studio at my house and make pottery my whole life. It didn't happen. So all through college, my professor would always tell us, if you want to be an artist, don't be a teacher. It's like, you're not going to have time to make art if you're a teacher. Okay. So I graduated college with my degree in art, and I was like, okay, now what? What do I do? There was part of me, my family really was like, be a teacher. There's jobs, be a teacher. And I was like, well, but I was told not to be a teacher because I can't make my art. But I weighed my options, and I was like, well, that's probably the best thing for me to do. So I went to Kutztown University and got my certification in art education. And fast forward a year and a half later, and I started teaching at Weiser, and I love it. I get to be around art every day. So even though I'm not at home necessarily making art on my own and selling my artwork and living off of that, I still get to make art all the time, and I get to help inspire other people to make art, and I get inspired by students all the time to make art, which is really fantastic. Ceramics is still a dream of mine. It's really expensive to do on your own, so when I first got out of college, I couldn't do it because it just was too expensive. I didn't really have a good paying job, so I had to put it on the back burner for a little while, and I started working here, and I could do clay in the classroom, which I really love doing, and I've been slowly working my way towards that goal. I own a kiln at home, It is not connected to electricity or anything. It's just sitting in a corner of my basement. But I am working towards finding a new house where we're going to have a studio for me to set up so I can work on my clay. So I'm still working towards that goal of mine, and I will get there. So anyway, Ms. Shade was talking to me about SRI and wanted me on board and asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I'm not really sure what I will do, but it sounds really awesome and I want to be a part of it. She's like, if there is anything in the world that you could do, what do you want to do? I was like, I would really love to learn how to do Raku. She's like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds amazing, let's do it. And I was like, okay. So I started doing some research. I contacted a local artist. His name is James Pastor, who I've met through the Goggle Works. He worked there for a while, and he ran a lot of our teacher in-services and stuff. So I got to know him through that. But he has his own studio in Burnville, which is like right down the road. So I've been in contact with him, and he's going to help us through this process. And this past week, I wasn't here all last week because I was taking a class at Goggleworks through the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and James was my instructor, and I learned the Raku process. And it is so much fun. So I'm here today to share with you what I did this past week at the Goggleworks, and we are in the process of bringing this to Conradweiser, which I'm really nervous about and really excited about all at the same time. So what is Raku? Has anybody heard the term Raku before? Probably not. How many of you have worked in clay before? Yeah, probably in school, right? So Raku is a process of firing ceramics. So you make your artwork out of the clay, and probably in school your art teacher took it from you after you were finished with it. You went home and then you came back and all of a sudden it was like stronger and harder because it went into the kiln, and then you put some funky stuff on it, you painted stuff on it, and then you went home and you came back and all of a sudden it was fired and looks beautiful and awesome, and then you got to take it home. Okay, so that's pretty much what we learned throughout school. And we don't really understand the process of what happens to that clay while we're at home and what our teachers are doing with them. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, and then talk to you about the process of Raku and how it differs a little bit from what we traditionally do in school. I don't know how this thing works. Do you know how this thing works? Anybody? I thought maybe just pressing that button, but it's not turning on. Do you have to turn it on? Turn it off?
Yeah, I don't know if the batteries are good.
Yeah, we're just using it. Oh wait, no, it is on. Oh, I got a pointer. That's working. Going to the computer. Okay, I will just use the computer because that will work. Okay, so Raku. Raku is a blend of traditions that came about thousands of years ago. It's a Japanese tradition, but it has been adopted and adapted by the Western culture, and it has significantly changed over the course of time. So we've really put a lot of contemporary innovations into this really old process. And so it has roots in the Japanese tea ceremonies. If any of you are familiar with that, it's a really special ceremony in the Japanese culture, and a lot of their pottery is made specifically like for the Japanese tea ceremonies. A lot of homes have buildings outside of the home specifically for tea ceremonies. So it's a really special thing in the culture. And that's where this process kind of originated, as a way to create these mugs for the tea ceremonies. And in the traditional methods of using Raku, you don't really use glazes at all like we would normally use here in the classroom. It's a process of firing the pieces at really hot temperatures and then removing them from the kiln and dousing them with water, which changes like the makeup of the piece itself. In the early 1900s, those techniques were brought to the United States, well, not even the United States, but the Western world. And we started playing around with innovating the technique. And that's when we brought in combustion. Okay, so lighting things on fire. And we found that doing that really changed the whole process and created some really beautiful effects with the ceramic work. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about clay itself. So there are three basic types of clay bodies. There's earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. Okay, so earthenware is what we consider a low fire clay. It is fire, it doesn't have a high refractory qualities to it. So it can't really withstand super high temperatures. So we fire it to a lower temperature so that the particles within the clay itself just fuse together. Okay, so like terracotta pots, like if you have any plants planted at home, I don't know if any of these are terracotta, these guys are terracotta pots here. Those are a low fire earthenware clay. They are porous materials, so if you were to plug up the holes that are in the bottom of them because they're planters and pour water into them, the water is going to absorb into the clay body and they eventually come out onto the table and make a mess. Okay, so these are not like waterproof. Then you have stoneware and porcelain, and both of those clay bodies are a higher fire clay. And they go through the firing process at a much higher temperature, which vitrifies the material and makes them more glass-like. And in those types of pottery pieces, they will not absorb water. And the water particles are too large to get through the material. Okay, so it will actually hold water. Many of you probably have stoneware at home in your kitchens. I know all of my plates and bowls and cups that I have from Bed Bath & Beyond are stoneware. Some of you may also have porcelain at home, and you have like fine china cabinets. That's where your mom keeps all of your porcelain. So it's just a more refined clay body. And that's usually a really white, like a bright white clay when it's fired. So where does Raku come into the process? You will see things such as Raku clay, but there really is no such thing as Raku clay. Raku is the process of firing. So you can really Raku any kind of clay, but you may have to make adaptations to that clay so that it can withstand the thermal shock of the Raku process. So there are certain things that you can add into the clays to change the refractory of the clay body. We use things such as grog and silica, which have, they're stronger against like higher temperatures, and it'll prevent the clay from breaking when it goes from really hot temperatures to really cold temperatures very quickly. Okay. Clay recipes here. So where does clay come from? Does anybody know where clay comes from?
Ground?
The ground, yeah. You can probably go outside, like close by, and find clay in the ground. And a lot of people do that, which I think is really cool. A lot of clay resides by like streams, stream beds and things like that, and by bodies of water. Lester Breininger, he was an artist in Robisonia for a long, long time. He is really well known all over the place for his artwork that he makes. And a lot of his clay he sourced right out of Furnace Creek. There's also Moravian Tile Works down in Doylestown. Henry Chapman Mercer was an artist who is world renowned for his tiles that he makes. His tiles actually line the floor of the Harrisburg Capitol building. If anybody's been in the Capitol building, you've walked on Moravian tiles. And he sourced all of his clay locally, right in Doylestown. And the Pottery Works, or the Tile Works, is still functioning today, so you can go and tour like their area where they work. And right outside the door, they have this big pile of raw clay, like sticks and stones and all sorts of stuff mixed in, but you have to like refine it and then work with it. The easiest way to get clay, though, is to go online and go to Amico or some company, and you click a button and then the clay shows up in a nice neat little box on your front step, and you can make clay that way. But you can also make your own clay by using different raw materials and mixing them together. So these are two examples of some Raku recipes, clay recipes. They are both suitable for Raku. On the right-hand side here, made up of some different things. So you can get like really refined minerals right from the earth, from different places, and mix them together to create different types of clay bodies that will do different things depending on what you want them to do. Some of the things will enhance their elasticity of the clay, or the refractory of the clay. It depends on what your intentions are for working with the clay. Okay. So even though Raku was traditionally used for making tea bowls, it's not actually food safe. And that we, didn't really know until, not too long ago when we actually started studying the bowls themselves. You do use, the westernized version of Raku, we do use glazes, but because of the way that it's fired, it's just not suitable for eating or drinking out of. So these are strictly decorative pieces. Like you could put like hard candies in a dish or something like that. But you wouldn't want to put juice in the cups. They will absorb some of that food material and then eventually grow bacteria and just be gross. We don't actually use the pieces for food or beverage that you put into through the Raku process. Traditionally, the pieces are hand-built using slab method. So you roll out flat pieces of clay, almost like you're rolling out cookie dough, to cut cookies. And then you create your pieces like that. The picture on the left is one that I made this past week. That's the slab method. Actually, the inside of that is a pinch pot, and then I put slabs around the exterior to create those flower-like petals. And then, of course, through our westernization of the process, we started throwing pieces on the pottery wheel as well that you can Raku. But you can Raku anything that you want to Raku. So there's an example of a wheel thrown piece on the right-hand side at the bottom. So don't quote me exactly on this, but what I was discovering through my course is that hand building using the slab method is a really nice method for Raku just because it strengthens the clay body itself because of the way that you handle it. Rolling it out is actually condensing the particles together, making the piece stronger and sturdier through the process. So I wanted to show this to you because I kept very detailed records of everything that we did this past week. We've been talking and really stressing about journaling all summer so far, and it is really important to do. I actually left mine over here. Let me go grab it quick. But artists always keep detailed records of what we do. In sketchbooks, you can write in them, you can draw in them to keep notes of the process, and we were really stressed to do that this week, especially when it comes to like glazing your pieces. You really want to take notes as to what you're doing. Through the Raku process, it is so unpredictable in the outcome of what you're doing that you always want to take detailed notes so that you could maybe possibly achieve those results again. So I just wanted to put a picture in there of some of my notes that I kept during this week. We were talking about trimming your feet of your pottery when you throw it on the pottery wheel. And so I have some notes about important things that we were talking about. And I am a very visual person, so I have drawings to keep myself on track of what we were talking about, to give myself a visual representation of what that meant. And it doesn't have to be pretty. You can scribble things out. I have more pictures of a really messy page to show you what that looks like too. Okay, moving on. Kilns. There are several different types of kilns that you could use to fire ceramics. Raku just being one type. And actually you could Raku using a lot of different types of kilns. But there are three basic types of kilns: electric kilns, gas kilns, and wood burning kilns or fuel kilns. The electric kilns are most common. That's what most of us have in schools and primary and secondary education because they're the easiest to use. They always fire in oxidation. So what that means is that there is always oxygen allowed through the kiln during the firing process, and it's a very controlled environment. So oxidation means that there's oxygen, right? Okay. So air is really important when it comes to firing and combustion. Okay. Fire needs oxygen to burn. And so this is a very controlled environment, and that one on the top left, this guy is an electric kiln. Okay, so this is what most of us have in schools, and that's exactly what our kiln looks like down in the art room. Okay, and that's electric. And what's really nice about that now, it's all digital, so I go in there and I hit like one button, and it does it all by itself, and I can walk away and come back the next day and it's done. You can manually program them to do different things, to fire at different rates, raising the temperature different ways, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. But then we have, and the electric kilns give you very consistent results. You can do the same thing over and over and over and over again. So that's really nice when you are creating like dinnerware and things like that, where you want sets of one thing. You can create the same process over and over again with very consistent results. Then you have your gas kiln, which looks like this. Of course, they can look very different, but this is a typical gas kiln. So it's fed by natural gases, propane, or something of the like. This always fires in reduction, meaning that we are reducing the amount of oxygen in that space, which is changing the combustion that's happening in that space, which changes the clay body itself. And this is much more difficult to get consistent results. There are so many different variables that happens in a reduction atmosphere that it's best for use of like one-of-a-kind works of art. Okay, so if you do something that gets a really great results, it's hard to replicate that again and again because there's always so many different things changing in that atmosphere. And then you have your wood burning kilns that could potentially look like this. Again, they look all very different, but that is fueled by wood, which is a much more labor-intensive process because you need to constantly feed it wood, because you guys probably have been around a campfire and wood doesn't last very long in the fire. And so you have to constantly be feeding it. And those firings usually take several days. My professor at Bloomsburg University had an anagama kiln on his property, and that's Japanese tradition of firing, and it's a wood-burning kiln, but it was built into the earth. So he had this big mound of earth on his property, and it was huge. Like, it maybe would fit in the length of the library here, like gigantic. Like you could go in and just like walk around. It's like a whole room inside. And that was fed by wood, and he would have firings that were like big parties at his house for 7 days straight. They would fire the kiln day and night for 7 days, 24 hours a day. So they're very labor intensive. Okay. So a Raku kiln, the ones that we're going to be using here are going to be propane fed, so a gas fed kiln. Before you get to the Raku process though, your pieces should be bisque fired. Yes, they should be, because they don't absolutely have to be, but it makes way more sense to do that. So bisque firing is most easily achieved in an electric kiln because, like I said, you hit a couple buttons and it just does it by itself. So that changes the chemical makeup of the clay body. When you're working with raw clay, it is, a solid material in a liquid suspension. So you add water to the